The following is a timely and insightful analysis by the Twitter X account Horn Perspectives. The opinions expressed in our op-ed section are solely those of the writer and may not, in part or in whole, necessarily reflect the editorial position of our channel. Eritrea, Defying Doomsday Predictions. Few countries have faced as many predictions of their demise as Eritrea. For 8 decades, Western policymakers and pundits doubted whether the nation could survive as a viable state, dismissing it as too economically weak and socially fragmented to function as an independent state. Many argued that Eritrea's best option was to unite with its larger neighbor, a fig leaf for their strategic ambition in the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea that led to Eritrea's annexation by Ethiopia under a federal arrangement in the 1950s, with little to no safeguards against abuses by the latter. Defying these grim forecasts, the Eritrean people launched one of the most determined military and political resistances in modern history. After 30 years long of armed national liberation struggle, they routed the Ethiopian forces in 1991 and held a peaceful, internationally observed referendum to exercise their inherent right to self-determination. After such resilience, one might expect the world to reconsider its assumptions about Eritrea's viability and the legitimacy of its struggle. Yet skepticism resurfaced when once again Ethiopia declared war on Eritrea on 13 May 1998. Analysts doubted that a small nation of 3 million could withstand Ethiopia's larger military and a population 20 times its size. Predictions of Eritrea's collapse spread quickly, with forecasts that Asmara would fall within days. However, Ethiopia failed to redraw the borders by force and instead accepted the solution Eritrea had championed, resolving the conflict through international arbitration based on colonial treaties. The arbitration court dismissed Ethiopia's boundary claims, including those over Badme, affirming that the disputed territories belonged to Eritrea. This outcome should have marked the end of hostilities and opened the door to regional cooperation. But that was not what followed. In 2003, the Sana'a Forum, a bloc including Ethiopia, Yemen, Somalia, and Sudan, was established to isolate Eritrea regionally. Once again, Western circles buzzed with predictions of Eritrea's collapse. By the late 2000s and early 2010s, Eritrea was targeted by an unprecedented disinformation campaign, with the US and its Western allies leveraging the media to promote a false narrative. Eritrea was portrayed as both economically fragile and politically unstable, yet also accused of financing armed groups across the Horn of Africa. Some even alleged that Eritrea hosted both Iranian and Israeli military bases, an implausible contradiction. Eritrea was further depicted as plagued by mass youth emigration, while simultaneously militarized enough to justify an arms embargo. At the heart of this disinformation was the claim that Eritrea was a destabilizer on the brink of collapse. The International Crisis Group, ICG, reinforced these narratives in two reports. Its report of 2010, titled Eritrea, the Siege State, warned that Eritrea was on the verge of collapse due to economic woes, political mismanagement, migration, and uneroding military. It argued that, quote, change was not a matter of if, but when, end of quote, and urged Western nations to intervene before the situation spiraled out of control. 3 years later, in 2013, the ICG released yet another report titled Eritrea Scenarios for the Future, predicting that rising tensions, military defections, and youth flight would lead to state collapse. The report urged Western governments to prepare for Eritrea's implosion to prevent a humanitarian crisis. Contrary to these doom and gloom predictions, Eritrea has not only survived but emerged as one of the most peaceful and stable countries in the region. A key turning point came in 2018 when the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, a long-time proxy advancing Western interests, was toppled by popular movements in Ethiopia. With the TPLF out of power, Eritrea and Ethiopia moved toward reconciliation, and the new Ethiopian leadership agreed to honor the international arbitration ruling of the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission. Even before the TPLF's fall, Western political elites began to realize that their strategy of weakening Eritrea through youth emigration and sanctions had little effect and was, at best, counterproductive. The persistence of these false forecasts raises crucial questions. Why did so many analysts and policymakers misjudge Eritrea? And how did these flawed narratives shape Western policy for so long? At the core of the disinformation campaign was a strategy to pressure Eritrea into accepting a regional order centered around Ethiopia, regarded as an anchor state of the US in the Horn of Africa. Sanctions and diplomatic exclusion were framed as necessary responses to Eritrea's supposed threat to regional stability. Allegations flew in every direction. One particularly bizarre claim, originating from Ethiopia and included in a UN report, accused Eritrea of attempting to assassinate African leaders during a 2011 African Union summit. This allegation was quietly dropped after further sanctions were imposed. Relentless media attacks created a chilling effect, silencing those who might have advocated for more balanced engagement with Eritrea. This campaign was not just political maneuvering. It was a psychological war aimed at breaking the spirit of the Eritrean people, fracturing their national unity, and cultivating a sense of isolation. Stories of a failed state, marked by economic collapse, repression, militarization, and mass migration, flooded international media, sending a clear message: the false narrative that Eritrea had no future and escape was the only option. Another reason behind the flawed predictions was the dominance of a West-centric view that prioritizes material indicators of national power, population size, economic output, and military strengths, and so on and so forth, over less tangible But equally important factors like patriotism, social cohesion, and national identity. Western analysts underestimated the Eritreans' deep desire to live in dignity, defend their sovereignty, and protect their homeland. They also overlooked the diaspora's ongoing connection to Eritrea and its role in supporting the nation during times of hardship, as seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. These judgments mirror the same errors made in places like Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, where resistance to foreign pressure was similarly underestimated. Unfortunately, many in Africa also adopted these simplistic Western-centered narratives. Western policymakers further erred by relying too heavily on Ethiopian intelligence, overlooking Ethiopia's vested interest in portraying Eritrea as a destabilizing force. Ethiopia exploited Western intelligence services' reliance, especially after 9/11, to promote a narrative that advanced the TPLF's dominance in Ethiopia and justified illegal and aggressive actions, including the blatant occupation of Eritrean sovereign territories and the unlawful, disastrous invasion of Somalia in 2006. The unrealistic predictions of Eritrea's collapse had real consequences. More than a decade of unjustified sanctions and diplomatic pressure deepened mistrust and further destabilized the Horn of Africa. Eritrea endured these challenges at great cost, while many countries once praised by the West as models of progress failed to make it into the present decade. Eritrea's experience reveals the limits of biased intelligence aimed at serving self-fulfilling prophecies, disinformation campaigns, and failed pressure tactics. It demonstrates that sanctions and diplomatic exclusion, no matter how strong, are ineffective when unwarranted and unjust. For Eritreans, the lesson is clear. Unity and self-reliance are essential to withstand any challenge. With focused priorities and the wisdom of an age-old saying, "The camels march while the dogs bark," Eritrea continues forward, undeterred by external noises. For Africans and the Global South, Eritrea's experience serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of relying on foreign narratives to understand one another. What happened to Eritrea is not unique. Many nations that chose an independent path face similar challenge. Pan-Africanism and Global South solidarity cannot thrive while relying on Western media narratives designed to perpetuate dominance. Horn Perspectives, November 4th, 2024. Thank you for listening. If you like this and other of our channel's contents, please hit the like button, share widely, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, peace, salam.